Hey, what's going on? This is Don, and today I want to show you the best way to put depth of field onto your renders. So I have a render here of this car, and this was done with Octane. Now, some people would argue that the best way to do depth of field is to actually render it into the frame. And whilst that will often look really good, especially with engines like Octane, which do some great depth of field, it means that you won't have any more control after you do the render. It will be baked into the frames, so you cannot change it after. So what I find is a good method to do this instead is by rendering an RPF file format and then extracting the depth of field pass in After Effects. So let me show you what I mean. So this is our Octane render just with some basic compositing. In Cinema 4D, I took the same thing, or the same scene, and I removed all the materials and all of the lighting and rendered this as an RPF file format. Now, I only did this because I was initially working with Octane. If this were, the standard renderer or physical renderer, I will just render the main sequence as this RPF file format instead of rendering it separately after, just so I can extract a depth pass from it. But anyway, going back into After Effects, this is that sequence now, the RPF sequence. In the effects, you want to go to the search box here and type in extract, and you want to get the 3D channel extract effect over here, and then drag this onto your render, and by default it will actually fetch the depth of field pass or the Z depth pass. And with the black and white point over here, we can adjust what the depth pass is going to look like. So what we want to do is have the furthest point in the frame to be dark, and then the closest points in the frame to be white. And I mean closest to the camera. So with the black point, we can pull this down, and that's going to darken the furthest point in the frame just until that detail disappears. And then the white point, we want to do the opposite and make it brighter at the front here. So this gives us a good range of the depth in the frame. So with this now, I can go back to the main comp, and I've already dragged the depth of field comp here. And to use this, I will create a new adjustment layer, go to Effect, and I'm going to be using the Frischluft depth of field plugin. You can also do this with the built-in camera lens blur effect, but we'll get to that shortly. Anyway, in FL depth of field, I'm going to go select my depth layer to point to that comp. And let's set the radius to something like 10, which I think is going to be too high, but I just want to illustrate the effect. And you can see now we have some depth of field. Now, the great thing about this plugin is you can actually point to the exact spot you want to focus onto. So if I do that, now you see we are focused onto the car. And if I just scrub through, you can see how this is working with these pillars close to the camera being out of focus. Now, later in the sequence, this is a totally different frame, so I would actually have to split these two different sequences up and then have a separate depth of field map for this frame and also a separate focal point. But once you know how to build this, it's going to be very simple each time. Okay, so that's using the FL depth of field plugin. You can also use the built-in camera lens blur effect, although it doesn't look anywhere near as good. So if I go to Effect, I want to go to Blur and Sharpen, and then Camera Lens Blur. And again, here we can load up that comp with our depth of field pass. But here you don't have the option to select the focal point, but you can select the distance. So if I go to the focal distance here, we can try and play with this until our car is in focus. So somewhere like here, for example, but as you can see, this doesn't look as good as using the FL depth of field plugin. And you also have this weird edge going along the car. So if you can use FL depth of field, I would recommend that. But if you don't, perhaps you can still use the standard camera lens blur effect, but I would actually consider baking the depth of field before I would ever use the standard effect. it just doesn't work as well as I would like most of the time. So generally I would avoid using the standard effect. But that's it. Just a quick tip showing you how you can extract a depth of field pass from an RPF render format in Cinema 4D, and you can always come back here and change these numbers to create a different depth map. You just have to go back to your main render and make sure you reset the focal point. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.